Hi, everyone, and what's new in AWS with enterprise support? Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be. Today, I am joined by the marvelous Stephen Salim. Stephen is a cloud optimization success solution architect with our Kumo team. I'm also joined by Pooja Govile, technical account manager with enterprise support in New Zealand. Backstage, we have a number of supporters today. I have Simon Lee, normally a host on the show, joining you in chat. And we have two producers on our show today, Maya Doobie and Harry Clark, also technical account managers with enterprise support. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Stephen and Pooja, welcome to the show. I'd love to hear about what we're going to be taking our customers through today as we navigate some recommendations at scale, focusing on Trusted Advisor and AWS Config.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for having me, Graham. I guess we'll start. Are you happy for me to kick off? Yeah. So hello. Yeah. Is that right?
Sure.
Okay. So hello, everyone. Yeah. So as Graham mentioned, I'm a solutions architect working for the support product team called the Kumo team. And today I'm really going to talk to you about how you can essentially prioritize using AWS Trusted Advisor. So on the screen, as you can see here, we've got Trusted Advisor recommendations. I think I believe everyone's quite familiar with AWS Trusted Advisor, but in case you don't, Trusted Advisor is essentially a configuration checks, best practice configuration checks that is available to you as part of your enterprise support. So if you've actually opened up your AWS console and search for Trusted Advisor service, and if your account is part of business or enterprise support above, you'll be able to see what you can see in the screen over here. And these are essentially collections of Trusted Advisor checks, over here, Trusted Advisor checks. And we've got about 400 best practices checks at the moment. And generally, when these services are being launched, when this Trusted Advisor check scans through your environment, you will find a lot of resources that comes up at the back of those findings. And one of the most common questions that we've asked a lot with our customer is that, how do I prioritize these best practices, right? So which one do I action first? Which one is actually more important? Which, I guess, recommendation should I be actioning first? Is it idle load balancers or Lambda functions, high error rates that I need to start taking remediative actions in my environment? So that's the common questions that we often get when we're speaking with our customers. So one of the common possible ways that you could do here is to essentially look at this from a business impact perspective. And this is where I'm going to share about, essentially on how you could leverage Trusted Advisor checks and architectural best practices and leverage the business impact insights to help you with those prioritization. So,
Stephen, could you tell us a bit more about these best practices? Where are they coming from?
Of course, that's a very good question, Graham. So best practices in AWS that we're referring to here is AWS Well-Architected. So if you're familiar with AWS Well-Architected framework, well-architected frameworks are essentially a collections of AWS best practices and guidance, architectural guidance to help you build and run your workload effectively in the cloud. And if you go into the web page that Well-Architected has, sorry, I keep on scrolling the screen share on the screen. So let me just minimize this a little bit so I think everybody can see it better. So this is the main page of AWS Well-Architected, and underneath that you will find 6 pillars that essentially represents all aspects and areas around your workload that we think are important for you to consider when you're building your workload. So that includes operation, security, reliability, and etc. And underneath that, if you go into the Well-Architected best practices, the white paper, within that best practices, you will find an itemized recommendation, architectural recommendations that you could do, such as in this one here, is to basically have a mechanism to implement decommissioning process. And within that best practice, you will find this level of risk exposed of best practices that is not if it's not established. What this essentially means is that it gives you an indication of what is the potential business risk that it has if you're not following these best practices. So this is what we're essentially meaning by leveraging the business impact insights and how essentially well-architected best practices can help you with that. So how does the two and two correlate together, right? So that's probably the next question. If you think about the trusted advisor checks here, for example, this idle load balancers. So this idle load balancers essentially checks whether you've got a load balancer that is not being used. Now, if you think about further, what is the actual best practices that relates to it, the architectural best practices that relates to it, then you would think that it has to do with this implementing a decommissioning process. So as a matter of fact, this is the actual best practices that is linked into that trusted advisor. And implementing decommissioning process in best practices essentially means that you want to make sure that you have the right set of mechanism to ensure that you are detecting unused resources so that you can optimize your cost. Because in the cloud, people often think that cost optimization is an automatic thing in the cloud. Moving your workload into the cloud presents you with so much cost optimization opportunities, but at the end of the day, it's an opportunity. You have to take the right set of action for you to realize that opportunity, right? So this is what we're essentially meaning in well architected. So
I like to
yeah.
present it as the primary benefit of cloud is agility. Agility helps you to spin something up out of almost thin air very, very fast, especially if you're all set up with infrastructure as code. But the caveat to that, or the catch that you always have to remember, is elasticity. And elasticity is about scaling out and then scaling back in again. So as soon as you don't need something, it's absolutely important, absolutely critical you remember to scale back in again.
Absolutely. So that's right. So we call that also the consumption model, right? I mean, like if you don't turn off the lights, you'll ultimately still be paying for it. So to take advantage of that consumption model, you have to apply the right practice. But moving on to this, the next thing that you basically the next thing I'd like to share with you essentially is the correlation that currently exists within AWS well-architected best practices and trusted advisors. So what we currently have is actually behind the scene is actually a mapping between trusted advisor checks that you see over here with the actual architectural best practices in well-architected. And the way you consume the well-architected best practices in AWS is through the use of a well-architected tool. Essentially, you would conduct an architectural review. And if you're not familiar again with well-architected tool, this is another free tool that is available in the console. I've just prepared this in the screen so that we don't have to wait for loading time. But if you search for well-architected tool, and if you look at the workload, you can actually create and define your workload. Once you've done that, you'll be able to see you'll be able to run a review leveraging this. So essentially, what you can access with well-architected tool is a set of questions and best practices within all the 313 best practices that we currently have on AWS well-architected framework. And you can see within that, you'll have a set of questions as well as the link of that trusted advisor recommendation. Let me just bring up one thing. So this one here. So for example, this is the specific questions about making sure that you have the right way to decommission resources. And if you look at the trusted advisor checks tab, you will find the correlated best practices, like trusted advisor best practices checks that you will that essentially maps to these best practices. So what that actually means is that when you're conducting the review process, the well-architected review we commonly call, you'll be able to support that with data points from trusted advisor checks. So this is to show the correlation. Now, the next question that you might be asking
just before you go on, Stephen,
go ahead.
When you're using this as a solution architect, you'll be running well-architected framework reviews with customers. Is this a part of that review? Do you typically run through the question and then review what's been flagged in Trusted Advisor in this Trusted Advisor check?
Yeah, I mean that's if you have access to trusted advisor, what we recommend is what you would recommend you to do is to support that discovery process with tangible data points, and that tangible data points being configuration checks that comes in, because ultimately, I mean, we don't really prescribe the way you conduct this assessment. But what typically people do, if you're working with an architecture review board style of model of organization, you would be leveraging this question sets that you'll be asking the applications team to make sure that they're building stuff the right way. And well architected is typically used for that too sometimes. And to with those questions entails a bit of subjectivity sometimes, right? So that is why having this set of configuration checks to support you with that question set will, one, accelerate your the next action point, so you know what exactly that you need to do, uh, as well as reducing the subjectivity. So you essentially have a proof and data points of what you're assessing. So that's that.
Stephen, I have a one quick question.
Of
Is
course.
this trusted advisor is at like for a particular workload? So are you including a particular account, or is it like it can include multiple accounts? Even for a workload, it can be a prod and non-prod. So do we need to have a separate uh, architect review
Right.
for that?
Yeah. So that's a very good question, Pooja. So at the moment, Trusted Advisor currently looks at your workload resources at the entirety. Like, it doesn't really have a context at this point from
Right.
an application perspective on tagging. But I'll get to the thing that I'm about to show you, which is the tool that I'm creating. But before I jump into that, I'd just like to build out the building points of why that tool exists. And on that point, it really hinges around this mapping essentially. So we understand now that there is a trusted advisor checks, your essential configuration checks, and then with that, like if you look at 100 of them, you'll be asking yourself, which one do I need to do first? And then the typical suggestions that we recommend is, so, well, you got to prioritize them based on the business impact that could potentially happen in your architecture, in that workload. And how do you find those business impact? Then you can refer to the best practices in well architected. And this is where the mapping comes in. But to access those mapping, it's not really convenient to do this over the console, isn't it? As a matter of fact, there is actually a different way to access that mapping. And oops, here we go. So to access that mapping from command line. So as well architected tool provides you with an API access, and with AWS API, you typically are able to make a command using AWS command line, and to to get essentially the mapping information of that trusted advisor checks and well architected. Let me just over here to show you. You can essentially run a command line in AWS the AWS well architected command line like so. And I'll copy and paste the command because I'm not really a fast typer, although I'd like I'd like to be able to type it, but it's a bit long command. Once it's pasted, it will show on the screen. Let me just copy that, and I'll explain what the command does. So
Perhaps, Stephen,
this
if you
is
could just zoom in on that screen, it's difficult to see
yes, of
at this
course.
zoom level.
1 second. Yeah, one moment. So right here. Is this okay?
Much better.
Much
And
better. Okay.
you're running this in a cloud shell, right? So that's running on
That's
an
right.
EC2 instance in your environment.
No, it's well, it is. I think it's running an EC2 instance somewhere, but it's not in my environment. Cloud Shell is essentially an offering that I think, I don't know what, I forgot when was it actually released, but this helps us so much. We used to run command line. If we want to run command line in AWS, we need to open up an EC2 instance and run them. And then when Cloud9 comes in, if you haven't heard about Cloud9, those are the IDE, the AWS cloud version of IDE. But Cloud Shell essentially is an ephemeral shell environment that can spin up within seconds, as you just saw, and you can basically run command lines, and it has all of that assumed roles for you to access that.
Yeah,
So yeah,
amazing. Nice.
I love it. I use it all the time now. So what I have here, Graham and Pooja, is essentially the command line to list the check summaries of trusted advisor checks. There's a bit long, so that's why I copy and pasted it. But to give you a breakdown of what the structure is, essentially you're calling the AWS well architected service CLI, and I think I can't. Apologies, I don't know what the term is, but the actual command that you're calling is called list check services, and then you'll pass down a couple of parameters in that CLI. One of it being the workload ID, the lens ARN, the pillar ID, question ID, and choice, and many others. But once you've done that, what you'll be getting at the response of this API is essentially a representation of what you saw on the screen, which is really the mapping, right? So this is essentially the trusted advisor checks that is mapped to the specific best practices. And you know that because if you look at the ID that it presents, and if you go back into the trusted advisor check reference wiki, underneath here, you will see that this check ID essentially refers to the idle load balancer trusted advisor checks. So you can essentially access this mapping through the command line that I've just shown you and doing that. But then accessing
Stephen,
that
we've got
yeah.
a question from our audience. Can the well-architected framework be considered standard for any cloud, or does it refer specifically to AWS? And on the same lines, why do we have separate well-architected framework? Why is it not standard?
Separate well-archicted framework for other cloud vendors. I think if I read the message correctly,
Exactly.
Is that right, Graham? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'm trying to answer this the best way possible. I can't really comment on why the other vendors like Azure and Google has built well architected. But when AWS well architected was built, it was essentially at the back of if I remember correctly, there was an article that was built in 2006 around the cloud being the movement of services being in the cloud, being that it's built on top of a microservices model. You can essentially build the shape of your architecture as like Lego blocks. And the biggest question that the customer asks at the back of that as well, then if it's a Lego block, how do I know what good looks like? Right? Because you could build a Lego block, you can build a bridge using a Lego block and one shape and versus the other. But you're not gonna how do you know that the quality of that shape is gonna sustain your business? So this is really what the well-architected best practices was really set out to do at the very beginning. It was to give you a guidance on how you should actually operate in the cloud. A lot of the actual best practices in well-architected are essentially collections of common architectural best practices. But there are certain areas that are tailored towards AWS specific architecture. You will find that a lot in the area of reliability and the others. But the other area as well in well architected for AWS version, it also gives you insights towards what AWS services that you could leverage to meet those goals. So one of the things that I've used as when I started my journey in AWS about 10 years ago, you look at well architected as an information hub towards what services that I have, because back then we only had 20 services, if you remember, Graham. But now we have
so much easier to know all of them.
It's so much easier, right? Like you had that. You click on the console on the left hand side, it didn't fill the entire screen, but now you need a search bar. So what my point is, you want to make sure that the service that you're leveraging, it really needs to meet the business purpose of what you're trying to do. And if you look at the architectural best practices as closer towards what business objective that you wanted to do, because why do you use Lambda, right? Why do you use AWS backup? Because there is a certain business purpose and architectural purpose that you wanted to do. And if you look at well architected that way, it will give you a directions to what services the AWS can have. So hopefully that answers and satisfies the answer. But if not, feel free to ask again. But in a nutshell, we created AWS well architected for the purpose in guiding customers building specifically in AWS environment. The AWS well architected framework, that is.
Thanks, Stephen.
Cool. No worries. So going back into this again. So where I think if I'm correct, where I was showing you about the idle resources, and as you can see, if you try to map this best practice, like if you accessing this mapping using a command line, obviously it's not the most scalable way to do, right? Because it's tedious, it's programmatic, it's meant to be used for a program to do. And this is precisely why today I'm going to walk you through this solutions that myself and Carlos created that you can access. It is an open source project, so you can go into GitHub repository. If you search the Trusted Advisor Tools GitHub repository, and underneath that, you will find a folder called AWS Well Architected. And underneath that, you will have the two folder, but the one that you want to start with is the optimization starter. And this is essentially a solution that we built, and myself and my colleague Carlos, who can join today, built to really help accelerate that discovery process of trusted advisor checks, and helps you gain visibility towards what is the business impact, what is the relationship of the business impact that it has through AWS Well Architected. So in a nutshell, just to explain a little bit on how the architecture works, we've got a service called AWS Systems Manager. Specifically, we're leveraging the automate. I think it's now called Automation Runbook, if I'm correct, but it used to be called AWS Automation Document. But yeah, we're leveraging that particular automation runbook specifically in AWS services to essentially document a workflow to query your trusted advisor checks, and then call out the API that I've just shown you, create a mapping on well-architected best practices, and then come up with a nicely digestible report that you will see soon. And I'll do a quick demo on how that looks like, but just if you want to deploy this in your environment later, what you do is you basically go to this repository, clone this repository, and then go to the specific folder and run the SAM build command that I see over here. It takes about a minute or 2 minutes for it to deploy, because it's going to deploy a CloudFormation templates. But so that's why, for the purpose of this demo, I've pre-deployed a lot of that resources. But what you will end up with is essentially a resource, a systems manager resource, a document in systems manager called the Trusted Advisor Well Architected Optimization Starter. And this documentation, if you look at the new way that you could visualize the steps in Systems Manager now, you can see that it's essentially calling out a script. It's running a synchronous script. Behind this, we've actually got a Lambda function that backs it up and that does all of that logic for you. And then the Lambda function will run asynchronously. And once that job has finished, it will call back into the Systems Manager to complete them. But let me show you how it actually goes, right? So if you click on that execute, if you run the Systems Manager, what you'll be presented is not a blank screen. It will coming up soon.
Thinking. Here it comes.
You'll be presented with thinking. I know this is the joy of like running a live. There it goes. Almost there. Here we go. Okay, cool. So we've got this, right? There's a few parameters that you can put in. So one area is that the well-architected best practice region. So where the role basically is the role that this systems manager will use. Oops, sorry, let me close this. The systems manager will use to access the services that it needs to do. So the script, like the solutions, will pre-build some of the roles for you, but the thing that is required for you to fill in is really what is the region that you'll be running this well-architected best practices for you. Because at the back of this, at the back of the solutions being run, the systems manager being run, a workload, a well-architected tool workload that you'll see right here, another instance of the well-architected workload will be created on the region that you specify. So if you want to create that workload in US East 1, just like what we're going to do right now,
it's another best practice,
that
right?
Will create
Be consistent
a workload. You
with
can specify
your regions.
the name, and this one here I'm just going to use. Yeah, that's right. Well, it depends on where you want to run the region in this particular application. This systems manager, I deployed them in US East 1, but you can technically run the workload in whichever region that you like. So I'll just call it demo, Stephen. And this is for you, Pooja, because you've asked a question before about, hey, if my trusted advisor checks has got trusted advisor checks all of the resources, but then if I'm running my review, I'll be running that from a specific workload. how do I know? How do I differentiate this resource belongs to which application, right? So typically, the way people
That's correct.
typically, the way people discern which application that they use is they leverage AWS tagging, right? So they will tag those resources like this EBS volume, EC2 instance to which specific applications that I have. They will name it an application name, and this solutions what it can do as well is that it can discern which resources to check based on those tags. So you can essentially filter. So if you want to run the scan for a specific application on this, what you can do is you can put in the tag value, the resource tag value and the resource tag key that you want to filter out from that trusted advisor resource. So the Lambda function that will run will do the filtering for you based on the tag key. So that's that. So there's a other like field like reporting where the report is going to come in, but this one here, we're just going to put that inside an S3 bucket. But once you've done that, you can click on run and execute. And because I have specified none on both of that field, it will basically scan through all of the resources just for demo purposes. And what you see here is the script is actually being executed. And as I mentioned before, the script is actually backed by a Lambda function that was created as part of that solutions. And the Lambda function, if you look at the log within that Lambda function, I think if I search here, you can see that it starts doing something. Now, this will take about a minute or two, because to access that API, the script will essentially need to create a temporary workload for you, and you can actually see that while it's running in the well-architected workload. So under workload, you'll be able to see this one here called WA temp with a unique ID at the end. This is a temporary one for us to really create that and access that, call the API to access that trusted advisor checks. So this will run for a couple of a minute or two. But once you've done that, once that script is complete, I'll just show you the what it looks like.
Here's one you prepared earlier.
This is the one that I've prepared earlier. So by the magic of a cooking show style, of the one that came out of the oven. So just that's a bit dry, isn't it? Yeah, you know what I mean. So this is the one that I prepared. I know this is the one that you like. Once it's finished, you'll see that essentially the Lambda function will invoke a success invocation to the script, to the systems manager document, and it will render the systems manager document complete. And you can, like in that field before, you can specify an email address that will send you an email, and that email address will point you to the S3 document where the reports is created. And this is one of the report that is created. And if you have a look at, and if you download this report, and if you have a look at what the record looks like, it will look like this. Let me just make it smaller so you can see properly. So on the first field, you'll see the name of the trusted advisor checks. And then you'll have the description of that like the trusted advisor checks. This is stock standard from Trusted Advisor. But the third field, you will see the actual best practices implementation and well architected that it's mapped to, along with the pillar, and most importantly, the business risk and the status. Now, these are the two important fields that you could think like that you could look at to essentially help you prioritize which area that like which resource that you need to do first. Now, if you look at the status as a way to give a gauge on a sense of urgency, then you could look at then you could look at the business risk as another area where you look at on how you can prioritize them. So this is it. So this is essentially the tool, what it does, and how it can generate a report.
Stephen, I have a question about the column on business risk. Does the tool make it straightforward for a customer to customize risk for a specific trusted advisor check? Perhaps for their business, the risk needs to be a different value, and this would allow them to put a filter across trusted advisor checks specific to their business context.
That's a good question. At this point in time, the tool is specifically tying the business risk to well-architected context business risk. So if you do have like your own business context, from trusted advisor checks to your organization, you can essentially you need to essentially create and extend that mapping, and for that you have access to the code. This is an open source. You can go ahead and freely modify them if you like. But yeah, at this point in time, this business risk really is biased towards the AWS well-architected best practices. Um, so one last thing before I close this, to help you with prioritizing this. Typically, if you look at the two dimension, one way that you could do to prioritize is to look at the level of urgency based on the checks, as well as the business impact on AWS well architected. And one of the things that we commonly use as a method to create order on this prioritization is what we call the Eisenhower method. You probably have heard about this before. It's essentially a prioritization plotting metrics that tells you which area is more important based on the priority. And on this one, on these solutions that I have, Carlos has actually made it easy for you to um, extend the solutions into an Eisenhower plot. So if you follow through the documentation at the very bottom, you'll see a section called optional. And if you follow the instructions there, it will actually walk you through to set up an Amplify application. And I've got the Amplify application deployed over here. Once you've deployed that, at the back of that report that was generated from the first from the tool, you will actually get two files. The first one, you'll get the HTML file that gets you to see this one here, the report like this. But the other one, you also get a JSON file, which is essentially the metadata that's backing up the tool. And you could load, so let me just show you. So that's the report. Here we go. So there's a folder called JSON. And if you look at, and if you download one of that files, that file there, and then you can actually load that into this Eisenhower metric application. So what that will give you, so I'll just load that. It will give you that essential resources that you saw before at the back of those risks. And based on that business risk and check status, you can load them into the Eisenhower metric and do your prioritization and discussion with your team this way. So this is just another goodies that we thought would help customers essentially help you prioritize your resources on Trusted Advisor. And that's it. That's all I got to share today. Hopefully that's helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to drop it on the chat. More than happy to answer.
Amazing, Stephen.
Very nice.
Wow, that's a lot. That was a lot to take in. A lot of good stuff there. I mean, tying together well architected with Trusted Advisor and putting a wrapper around that with this tooling that allows you to dive in and search through the results. Really, really interesting stuff. What did you think, Pooja?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. This is so awesome.
Sounds good.
Pooja, I'd love to
Yeah.
hear about AWS config. You've come here today. You're a bit of a gun with config, and you're gonna show us how to do prioritization with AWS config, and you're gonna dive into the console there. Tell us
Yes.
what you're gonna take us through.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just start with my introduction quickly. I'm Pooja Govil. I'm a technical account manager from AWS Enterprise Support, and I'm based in one of the most beautiful country, New Zealand. Okay, so today basically I am here to talk about how we can simplify the tasks that are associated with the challenges of compliance in the cloud. So I'm going to demo a feature of AWS config, which is known as advanced queries, which will give you the ability to query your entire AWS like footprint from one central location, and that too you can use a simple SQL like query. Okay, and also on the top of that, you have a generative AI capabilities that can let you ask questions in a plain English, and it will convert them for you in a ready to use query format. Okay.
Just before you go further, Pooja, we have a question from Bad Row 000. This one's for Stephen, and it's asking to elaborate on how the savings were estimated in the data that was shown just at the end of your demo there.
Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually going to respond that to you on the chat. The savings in that questions are I think it's based on the resources that it checks. I need to double check on specifically how they um, on how they calculate that. Uh, I don't have the answer at this point, Graham, unfortunately, and I'll stay truthful on that one. But yeah, it's the but there is a essentially a way that you can extract a lot of um, in save not saving information like cost informations from CUR data, CUR data. If you've heard about the cost usage report, and my understanding is that Trusted Advisor has consumed that as well, or it generated like leveraged those as well. But I need to double check on that one, Graham. Thanks for the for the answer for the question, Brad.
Cool. So I'll just take over. So what happens is like most of my customers usually will have multiple accounts in the multiple regions, and as they scale and grow in the cloud, you will also see a dramatic increase in in their AWS resources, right? So one of the things they want to achieve is how to get a relevant data. To out of those resources to gain a meaningful insights from that. So how would you query those resource configuration properties? You may want to use it for auditing, or you may want to use it for a compliance or any kind of operational troubleshooting. So this is where the advanced query in the config uh, gives you a very valuable capability that can help you extract the intelligence out of the data which is captured in AWS config. And I'm going to show you that. So how do you go there? We go to the AWS config service. And there you go. And you see here the advanced queries. So you can use these advanced queries for like multiple scenarios. Like you can use it for inventory management. If you want to basically find how many EC2 instances I have for a particular types. So you can use it for that. You can even use it for security and operational intelligence. Like you want to know how many S3 buckets are open to the world in your environment. So, and also for a cost optimization activity, like if you want to know how many unattached EBS volumes are there. So so imagine the powerful capability it has. It can actually help you to manage all the resources from one single location. So you can, as you can see in the screen, you have set off already some of the like if you go to the advanced queries here, you have already a set of queries which are already there for you that comes out of the box. All you have to do is you have to click on that and you have to copy to the editor, and you can do that. But we will create a new query. So if you want to have a customized query, you just go on the new query here, and under the screen you will see the scope of the query. The scope of the query is basically like whether you want to query from a particular account or you want to query from the multiple accounts. So you can always select the aggregator for that. Aggregator is basically will collect all the information of the compliance data, and it will aggregate into one single account. So I have no, sorry, I have a control tower installed in my accounts. So I have by default a aggregator deployed because of the control tower. So I will choose that so that I can find resources across my accounts. And this is a query page here where you want to query your anything you want. So do you want to have some example you want to query, or maybe I can just pick something?
Tell us about what's running in this account. What sort of things would we expect to find through AWS config and what sort of things are you expecting?
Any kind of resource state, your state of resources basically. So if you have a EC2, like hundreds of EC2 running, and you like have a information regarding the particular EC2, you can actually find that. Even like for a security group, like as an example, if I just run this query, I'll just copy this here and just run a query, it will show all the security groups that are part of the EC2. So this is a capability. You can actually even identify any kind of security risks. So if you want to find S3 buckets, and you can find how they are configured, you can also export them here, and you can share it with your internal team to take a particular action about it. So this is something really like very helpful for the team, like for any kind of inventory management or cost optimization, and even for the compliance.
So, what other sort of resources? How could we search what's going on inside this account to find something interesting? Maybe for those of you in our audience, maybe you've got a query or there's a certain resource you'd like to look for here and get a report on. I presume if the resource isn't available, it's just going to return nothing. But
Yes,
yeah.
that's correct. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. One of the interesting thing that I want to show you, if anybody wants to actually query it, please feel free to type in the chat and I will add it here. But one of the interesting thing I want to show you is the one of the challenge that we have is like not everybody is an expert in the SQL. So I personally myself dabble a lot in the SQL, and I rely sometimes a lot on Googling as well. So and also to like we do have uh, basically here sorry, one second. Yeah, so we do have a new feature here. So I was looking at where did it go, sorry. We do have a new feature here, which is a natural language query processor. So what it does is like you can type your query in a simple plain English, and it will extract a query, like it will create a query in a query like format for you.
Oh, that is going to
Wow.
help
So
me so much. I
yes.
just, no matter how much I try, I can't learn SQL.
That's what I was saying. That's really cool that we could generate commands like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Currently it is in preview, but like it uses Bedrock, which is that it's a generative AI
Yeah.
capability, and that will help. Like as a like example, if I type something, probably say provide list of all available volumes, and if I generate this, um, it's going to take a moment. Yeah, so you got a
Oh, wow.
query which is ready to use it, and what you can do is you can just populate to the editor here, and it comes down in, and when you run it here, you can get the data around that. So it does find the information below.
That is very, very handy, Pooja.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and you can even use filters like if I just use like provide a list of all EC2 instances, group by EC2 instance type, you can do even like complex queries uh, if required.
Whenever we're running generative AI on this stream, I always love to ask anyone in the audience if you have a query you'd love to throw into that to test out what's going on, please pop it in chat. As long as it's something we think we can put on screen, then we'll run it for you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So as you see here, it is grouping your instances here by the instance types, and it also giving you the count of that. So, and this is for your like entire AWS org level. So you would know how many resources you have, and you can find all the state details about those resources.
Does this also help you to find anything that's non-compliant?
Yes, it does. So, like, if you want to find EBS volumes that are unattached, so like if I just What would you like to find actually?
I think I'd like to find security groups that aren't compliant.
Simon
We've
just
got a
asked,
question from our
we've got a
audience.
question, yeah.
Can I query for RDS Postgres number of connections?
I can
Question
put
is
that
from
in the
Shal29. Thank you, Shal29.
yeah. So let me just put that in. See what the NLP gives me back. Obviously, if the query is there, it's fine. I don't have resources. I will get 0 resources out of that. But if the query generates, it's pretty great, right?
Has it ever failed? The command that you put in from your experience working with
Sometimes, yeah, because maybe it is in preview, so it is still like creating a lot of use cases. But sometimes it does, or sometimes it may be due to the connection as well. So I do get, you see, the query select resource ID with a max connection configuration where resources DB and engine is Postgres. So if I go down here and if I run it here, I would not get any resources because I don't have it. But definitely, you can do that.
I'd just like to point out AWS Config is a configuration management service. And I think this question was asking for the number of active connections. And the query that's been returned is the number of max connections, which is a configuration for the service.
Okay. So maybe we can just make it in a more clear language and see what do we get. So I just put active in the query.
Who knows, right? We may be learning some other configurations within RDS that we didn't know about. But this is quite useful because it's really hard for me like to keep track on the manual, like reading syntax, like syntax manual. It's like as as you go into regex and the way you structure it, it's getting more and more complicated. Oh, here we go. What do we got here?
We did get some data. Yeah, I was expecting it should return something like active. For probably what this connection will show, whether it will give you a list of active connections probably, and it will filter here and show the active. But I can't test this because I don't have any Postgres in my environment. So my understanding is this will give you a list of active instances over here.
That's good. So from AWS config, Pooja, is there a way that you could correlate that to, I guess, a certain pillar or best practices that is available in AWS?
Certain pillar or practices, like you do have automation remedies in the AWS config. When we talk about config, it is one of the well-known fundamental compliance service that runs at scale. So what we have is like we can identify the resources here, and we can see any compliance based on the resources. If you find like security groups that are too open to the world, and in that case what you can do, you can create automation rules to fix that, and you can also set those automation rules to run it at a particular intervals. So whenever they run, it automatically fixes your security groups, and it will automatically fix your compliance.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I also wanted to point out that since we're in the topic of AWS config, last year we've actually released 64 checks of Trusted Advisor operational excellence. That was actually backed by AWS config. So with those with this operational excellence checks, you basically can deploy the AWS config managed rules, and it will automatically enable the Trusted Advisor checks.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So yeah.
Is there any other question? Please feel free to ask me. Like I think this is what I wanted to show you today, and please feel free to type a question if you need anything.
Thanks so much, Pooja. And thank you very much to both yourself, Pooja, and Stephen for coming on today's show. If you do have a question, get in quick. Otherwise, we are going to wrap up today's show. It was wonderful seeing some of the breadth here with Trusted Advisor and how you can optimize the recommendations that are produced by the tool. as well as AWS config, and a little bit of generative AI there as well for good measure. Thanks again to our audience. I loved having your questions come through today, and I look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks' time. We are changing the time for our stream. So we will be moving to 5 p.m. Pacific time, which is 12 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time for the rest of our audience in Australia. I look forward to seeing you then. We'll have another bunch of amazing hosts from enterprise support and across the Amazon business, Amazon Web Services business, and I hope to see you there.
Hope to see you there. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Graham.
thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.